Clayton Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am going to try my hardest to keep my level down because it's a very emotive subject and we've seen a lot of passion in the House so far today talking about this a very important subject, and I don't think there's anybody in this House that would agree that we don't have a major problem in New Zealand at the moment and potentially in the future if something is not done about the issue of temporary migrant workers and the exploitation of workers. And I want to make it very, very clear with what the Minister's comments were. When he opened up his statement, he said, "This bill is fit for purpose." Mr Speaker, I have to say, for whose purpose? And I have to question some of the patriotism when we talk about the purpose of looking after New Zealand and New Zealanders first and foremost. However, he did come back quite nicely and say he understands New Zealand First's point of view because New Zealand First has a very, very strong immigration policy and we have a very strong view on immigration. Now, tongue-in-cheek there, Mr Speaker, because I know he wasn't saying that in a positive way, he was trying to make it negative, but he mentioned quite openly about Christchurch, using Christchurch as an example of where we've got temporary migrant workers that we need. Now, this is absolutely 100% in line with New Zealand First policy. New Zealand First policy in our manifesto says immigration is about the people that we need, not about the people who need us. Now, we need those workers that are down there, those skilled labourers, those skilled workers, because we don't have enough of the skills that are required to rebuild one of New Zealand's most important cities. But I challenge the Minister to come up with another area, another location or another workplace that needs and requires the sorts of numbers that are flooding New Zealand workforce with temporary migrant workers. Because I can't think of another one. Absolutely, Christchurch needs that. Sorry, Mr Bridges, you Bay of Plenty with our kiwi fruit workers, you must be living on a different planet, sir. That does not make any sense whatsoever because that makes no sense at all. When we have got 143,000 New Zealanders looking for work, we should be doing more to get those people skilled and into our workforce because the money that's coming in, I'm getting to myself where we've got that level, you see, we're getting ourselves into a situation where we are getting these people from overseas, they're working here for a short amount of time and then they're heading back, taking that money away. Now, another member earlier on mentions the temporary migrant workers visas for our students. What a great subject to bring up that is, because at the end of the day, we are exporting our education system, which is a very sound policy to be doing. We've been doing it for years, encouraging people to come to this great country, get a good education, because it's the people that we need are bringing the wealth to our country. It's a zero-sum game when we then go out and give them, 100,000 of them, employment to cover themselves off while they work here. Where is the benefit for New Zealand? And what about our New Zealand students that are struggling on a daily basis to get ahead, to pay their school fees, which are rocketing, borrowing more money to keep themselves afloat and get themselves skilled and to get themselves educated? This government is not doing anything to address that issue by allowing that to happen. We want to talk about our kiwi fruit workers. Why don't we incorporate and bring into a situation where we're encouraging our unemployed people to get off and get in and get part of the workforce? You know, a community wage where you can't just receive the benefit, you've got to be part of the community and work for that benefit. Now all of a sudden that is a huge incentive. Mr Speaker, I have to say, I think Mr Bridges is trying to be charming and it's not working.
Order. Sorry, I probably should have interrupted Mr Bridges, not for his interjections generally, because they're fine, but for referring to me repeatedly. Mr Mitchell.
Mr Speaker, thank you very much. Now, referring back to the Immigration Amendment Bill number 2 here, I'd just like to read a couple of points. This bill would, it says here, give temporary migrant workers the same protection from exploitation that illegal workers currently have under the Act. Wow, we actually give illegal migrant workers protection under the Act. Secondly, it says here, make liable for deportation employers who are resident class visa holders if they are convicted of exploiting migrant workers or knowingly employing migrant workers without work. Now, Mr Speaker, if we had an amnesty clause put into that, that might make some sort of sense, but you're asking these migrant exploited workers to go and whistleblow on their temporary employers, and there's no incentive for them to be able to remain or retain their work or relocate to new work. So all of a sudden this is not working. This legislation, this government hasn't listened to the submissions that have been made in Select Committee, and they're not listening to the outcome that we're trying to put forward here. We would be somewhat supportive of this sort of legislation if it actually addressed the problem at the source. Now, my understanding, and any sane person, a credible thinking man, would agree that if there was a leak in a dam and it was starting to grow, and then that leak turned into a crack and the crack turned into a major breach, the water would flow down and gouge away the land. Now, you wouldn't start trying to fix the land up at the bottom, you'd fix the dam up at the top, stop the leaking. There's nothing in this legislation that stops the leaking of the problem at the source. Now, we're talking about tightening up on our immigration laws. What interests me the most, Mr. Speaker, is the exploitation of these immigrants, these temporary migrant workers are being exploited by their own people. Just recently, we heard in the newspaper the Masala restaurant fined for exploiting migrant workers. They were exploiting their own people, Mr. Speaker. It was also raised that the exploitation of skilled migrant workers. Now, the people in Christchurch, the skilled migrant labour that we've got down there, they're not being exploited. They're being well remunerated and well looked after for the job that they're doing. The exploitation is coming from those unskilled workers, from our kiwi fruit workers, from our pickers, our packers, our fruit industry. We're getting exploitation. Just recently, Mr. Speaker, I got some information sent through to me with regards to the Rena in the Hawke's Bay. Mr. Bridges, you'll be well aware of the Rena. You might not be well aware of this because, of course, you might not be in touch with those people. But the reality is 8 New Zealand workers that have been working on the Rena for up to 3.5 to 4 years have all lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks. 8 New Zealanders have lost their jobs in the last 2 weeks after working on the Rena for 3 to 4 years. Why? Because they have been replaced by temporary migrant workers. That's right, 6 people from Indonesia, 2 people from India. And why? Because they're being paid subconditional wages, and they're trying to undercut the value of New Zealand workers. Now, we do not support increasing employer dependence on cheap migrant labour at the detriment to New Zealand. And that's what's going on. You're not getting to the source of the problem by hitting it off at the pass. Now, anybody would understand if you want to control your room, you have to control the doorway to your room. This has not been done, and this legislation doesn't do anything about doing it. Weak labour market testing is also a major problem, and we've also got some serious issues with the black market bypass of the IRD. A lot of these people are using these temporary migrant visas as a way to cut the loopholes, to not pay their taxes. And these poor exploited people, and I can tell you another case, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Bridges, you might be interested to know this too, that late last year we had some issues in the Bay of Plenty with those very same exploited temporary workers that were promised to come to the land of milk and honey of New Zealand and get great work, $15 to $17 an hour, and they were exploited by their own people. Right? There was nothing ever investigated. This problem is not just a new problem. This problem's been going on for a very, very long time, and you can look interested as if you're reading something more important than listening to what we've got to say about this, because this issue affects the Bay of Plenty. In fact, it affects all regions of New Zealand. When I saw in the newspaper also looking at the problem about our Kiwis that lost their jobs over the Cricket World Cup. Kiwis, oh, you're interested again. The Kiwis that lost their jobs over the debacle with regards, well, I'm getting to the problem. I've already told you what we need to do. You need to get to the source of the problem. Simon, Bridges, seriously, as a minister, the source is where they are entering. Come on. Well, I tell you what, perhaps if you came and sat down and had a coffee with me, which you denied me because you said, I don't offer anything, what would I possibly offer you to sit down with you? Then how about you come and have that coffee with me? Maybe you'll change your mind because there's some rational thinking here. You haven't thought this problem through and you're not interested to come and talk to the people that have got some solutions. I put the challenge to you. Well, I've just given you a solution. Stop the problem at the source and come and have a coffee with me. I'll tell you what, Mr. Speaker, we've got all sorts of problems, and it is amounting now with 55,000 people have got of immigration in March. Last year, 35,000 people, and to finish things off, 2013, we had only 15,000 migrants enter this country. We have got an explosional problem that needs to be fixed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Sarah